Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. On Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Welcome to Inspired Conversations. I am so excited that you have joined me for today's show. It is going to be powerful. I'm your host, Linda Joy, publisher of Aspire Magazine and the best-selling publisher at the boutique publishing company, InspiredLivingPublishing.com. And today we are talking about forgiveness. And for those of you who have been following my brands for a while, you know forgiveness has played a major role in my life and in my own personal healing, as it has in the lives of so many others in my circle who have really stepped into its energy. And today, joining me is Di Riseborough. Di is an intuitive life strategist who combines spiritual psychotherapy, life coaching, and energy psychology to assist you in making positive changes and better choices. As an F-word specialist, F-word meaning fear and forgiveness, featured on the Oprah Winfrey Network, Di helps you become consciously aware of what fears are driving your decisions and acts as an emotional compass, helping you navigate life's challenges. As an expert on the subject of forgiveness, fear, and courage, her unique approach has helped many work towards greater self-fulfillment, mastery, and reduced anxiety and better relationships. Di is the author of the #1 bestseller, Forgiveness: How to Let Go When It Still Hurts, where through her powerful story of overcoming a number of life's challenges and ultimately facing the man who murdered her grandmother, she shows you and me how the impact of forgiving and facing your fears can change your life and reclaim your personal power. Welcome, Di.
Well, thank you, Linda, for that lovely intro. I'm honored to be part of your show today.
Well, you know from our personal conversations, this is a big one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Forgiveness brings up a lot of stuff for people. It's a very tender subject and invokes a lot of memories, emotions, and desires in a lot of us. You know, in every one of us. I mean, we can't get through life without being hurt in life and honestly, hurting others, right? So what do you feel stops so many of us from forgiving ourselves or even others?
That's a great question, Linda. I think one of the things I think that stops us is our pain. We don't like feeling that pain, so we sometimes tend to avoid it. You know, as you said, pain happens in life. It's a natural progression. We are going to get hurt, and sometimes it's too painful to even go down that road. And so, we go under the illusion that we're moving forward or we're moving on, and we forget that there's all this suffering that we are feeling that we just tend to avoid. That's the one thing, is the avoidance technique. And the second thing I think it just brings, the thing is that sometimes we are afraid to forgive or even think about that, because if we do, sometimes we feel that the person's kind of getting away with it, like getting away with murder, right?
Exactly.
As that saying. And in my case, it was that getting away with murder aspect. And so there's a lot of emotions that come up with that. And if we do, we like letting them off the hook. And I think that's a misconception in forgiveness, is that if we're forgiving somebody, we're allowing it to be okay. And it's kind of a double-edged sword, because it's not really true. It's really about forgiveness is about letting, so getting your power back from the person that has hold over you. Often I hear people say, well, I've let it go, and I've let it go. And I say, well, it sounds like you're still pretty angry. It's like, no, I'm not. I've let it go. I've moved on. I said, there is a difference between moving on and actually forgiving. So I think there's just misconceptions about forgiveness.
There was for me for many years too. And let's talk about your own personal experiences, as I shared in your intro, about how you found forgiveness and started this healing journey in your own life when after your grandmother was murdered.
Well, it took me a long time, to tell you the truth, Linda. I think one of the reasons we struggle with sort of our work, if you want to call it that way, is that we had this belief that we can do everything ourselves. Well, I did. I'm one of those people that think, well, I can handle life, right? I'm going to, take it by the horn and do it. I mean, I moved across the continent to a new country by myself, so of course I moved forward, right? But I think I came to the realization that I needed some help. And asking for help doesn't mean you're weak. And I think a lot of people feel that if I'm asking for help, there's something wrong with me. And that's really how my journey kind of began, is just recognizing that I can't do this alone. I was very afraid of my anger. The thing about the murder in my own story is that I was really, really angry, and I didn't know what to do with it. I don't know what to do with these emotions. And maybe because we're not taught as children, or we're not even taught at all how to deal with them. We have so much anxiety and depression and emotions that are swirling around that we get so overwhelmed that we just find ways of numbing it out or avoiding it, either by, maybe too much work, distracting ourselves with shopping or any some type of addiction or internet. And for me, coming to the place that I needed help was the first step. That was the very, very first step. And seeking out that help that changed my life forever. And that's why I do this work today, because I see the benefit of the work. Yeah, I mean, I still have to do the work. The person that supported and helped me, that's exactly what they did, support and help me. When it comes to forgiveness, we have to step up and do it ourselves.
It's so true. And, I know for me, I'll speak for myself, it wasn't easy, right? But for me, it bubbled up like an awareness of, it wasn't a conscious choice for me. I just kept working on myself, and then one day it just bubbled up, right? And I remember feeling like, oh my God, my heart isn't triggered anymore. And that's when I realized I was embracing the energy of forgiveness in my childhood situation. Has anyone described it that way for you, where they just kept working on themselves and their heart and healing, and then almost stumbled into forgiveness? Or from others, is it always a conscious choice to forgive?
I think it's individual. I think in my own experience, it was a kind of a cross between what you said in terms of you stumbled into forgiveness, you kept on working on yourself. I would say it was for me on some level that way as well, because I need to understand myself better. In order to, I think in a part of forgiveness is understanding ourselves. We talk about self-forgiveness, right? Not just forgiveness of others. I think part of that work is, as you get to know yourself, as you start to look at the dark stuff that resides within us. And one of the reasons people don't do their work or are afraid of any type of work is because they're afraid they're going to find out they might not be a nice person, or might not like aspects of themselves, which then translates into the external world. And so they avoid it. But self-mastery, and spending the time of self-awareness, of understanding who we are, why we behave certain ways, why we react a certain way. There's a lot of self-forgiveness that goes along with that, is realizing, there's a part of me that, is not the best version of myself, so I'm going to forgive myself for being snappy today, right? And then, learn from that. And I think that's that balance between, as you say, the more you worked on yourself, you sort of fell into the forgiveness. For me personally, it was my motivation. Is that I no longer wanted to feel, I didn't want to suffer anymore. I needed some peace. Because it does, I think people don't understand this subconsciously. Our wounding impacts us in the present moment in everything that we do. And we might not even see it happening, but it impacts our relationships, how we show up in the world. And I didn't want to be angry anymore. I was trying to control it as best I could, but there were points where it would just come out, I'd just explode. When you hold it in, and then something just happens and you snap, and you're like, this is, what do I do if it that lid comes off, right? And I didn't want to suffer the pain, the guilt I felt, some of the shame I felt, the hurt, the betrayal. I didn't want to go through the rest of my life with that. And so that's the conscious aspect. And I think sometimes people get to that point as well, recognizing that they want to shift something. But you have to be willing to forgive. That's the big piece. Number one step is you're willing to do this work.
I think it is the number one piece, because until you're willing, transformation can't come.
That's true.
And so one of the things is you talk about a lot is why it's so important for us to forgive ourselves from a spiritual and emotional perspective. Does that also go with forgiving others too?
It does. Often I talk about the world we live in today. We're the modern mystic. In life, everybody seems to be on a they're seeking something. There's a spiritual path they're traveling. And often I hear the term that we are a spiritual being having a human experience. And it's true. We are a spiritual being, but people forget that we are having a human experience. It's not necessarily the other way around. We are human having a spiritual experience. For me, my belief, and I came to realize this as I did my own work, is that, there's lessons that we learn. If I'm here to travel this world in a human, I need to do my healing of my wounded self, my human self, and bring in the higher perspective. What are the lessons within that? And for me, it was learning to forgive at that deep, deep level, and the amount, and also experiencing compassion at such a deep level. And so the spiritual aspect of it is extremely important in forgiveness. It's not that, I'm letting it go and giving it over to God. There is a part that we have to play. And often I have a discussion regarding this. A lot of people that say, I don't need to step up. God will take away my pain for me. And it's like, no, that's not necessarily true. That you have a heart for a reason. God gave you a heart for a reason. The pain and suffering needs to heal. And you have to show up. You can't just expect God to take it away. There's free will involved here. So from the spiritual perspective, it's healing ourselves on that level. And I think that sometimes people forget that aspect of it.
I can see how we can too. It's easier to say someone else, whether it's your divine source, will take care of it instead of doing the work. And when we come back from our break, Di, I want to talk about that more. And I'll be back in a moment with my special guest, Di Riseborough of DiRiseborough.com.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Inspiration for a woman's soul. Aspire Magazine, inspiring and supporting women on the path of self-discovery. Claim your free digital subscription today, which includes access to thousands of dollars of personal development bonus gifts from Team Inspiration partners. Claim your Aspire Magazine subscription today at subscribetoaspire.com.
Are you trying to get from point A to point B and need a little advice? Connect with the counselors at OMTimes Advisors. Whether you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual intuitive, the advisors participating at advisors.omtimes.com were carefully chosen based on their gifts, skills, and professionalism. OMTimes Advisors, connecting you with the best advisors in the business.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Hey, America, we need to have a little talk. We've got more food than we know what to do with in this country, yet 17 million kids in America are struggling with hunger. Makes no sense. Luckily, the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks has volunteers gathering excess food and getting it to hungry kids. They're kind of like food angels. Hey, become a food angel yourself by supporting Feeding America in your local food bank at feedingamerica.org. We can't do it without your help. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM Radio Network.
Welcome back. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. I'm your host, Linda Joy, and today I'm talking with Di Riseborough about forgiveness. So, Di, one of the pivotal moments in your life is when you faced the man who murdered your grandmother. What was your reason for being led to do so, and what happened after, internally, for you?
What led me to that, Linda, was that, I'd spent 3 years of doing my work. I decided to, first of all, I stepped up. I was willing to do this work. And that meant I needed to invest in myself. I valued myself enough because I didn't want to, I have a future. Like I'm 40 years to go. Do I want to live my life? I looked at my life and said, do I want to continue living my life this way? And it's like, no, I don't. So I'm going to spend the time and energy and money working on myself in this moment. So I spent 3 years working on myself in terms of understanding what had happened and, all the feelings that were happening within inside me, understanding them, healing them, dealing with them. And I got to a point in my last aspect of healing where I kind of felt everything shift within my heart. It exploded, my last piece of work. And at the time, the man that murdered my grandmother, his mother was very much involved. And she was more of a trigger, I think, for me than necessarily him who had killed her. Because she didn't get it. There was no justice. She got away because she had asked my uncle's stepson to murder my grandmother, and there was no repercussions from her. And every time I'd hear her name, my body would just react. I'd get so angry. And it wasn't matter, it's just a trigger, right? So when I did my last piece of work, I felt her presence come in. She would come in the past, just, feeling her, I'd get really angry. And for a week, she came in sort of into my consciousnness, and there was no response, actually no response from my body. It was very neutral. It was like, oh, there you are. And then she slowly started to fade. And I felt this it was a message for me, like, oh, I need to go back now. It was 12 years later since I'd seen him. And I was like, well, I need to go back and just, test this. I did this for myself to see, have I reached true forgiveness? Because I did feel I had, but I wanted to test it for myself. So, the universe creates, or God, or the divine creates opportunities for us. I had no idea where he was. So I asked for guidance, and it just fell into place very quickly. Within a week, I knew where he was. I got hold of the warden. They accommodated me because I was coming in from a different country. I flew back. I drove down to the jail or the prison, and they brought him into a private office for me, and it was the first time I'd seen him since the trial, and I wasn't even sure how I'd respond. And actually, there was no sort of emotional response in terms of what I had felt in the past. My anger, in the past, I wanted to just wring his neck. I wanted to sort of make him suffer. I wanted him to feel the pain that I was feeling. And he came in. We sat down. I was sitting across the room from each other. And then I kind of got up and I sat right next to him. For whatever reason, I just felt this need to. And we spoke for about 2 hours. And to tell you the truth, I didn't go back, Linda, for like, why did you do it? I didn't need to know all that kind of stuff. All I needed to do was just to test how my body was responding, to see how it reached this. And I felt I had, and I spoke to him. I told him how his action had impacted my life, the trust that had been broken, and not just the trust in terms of, with him killing my grandmother, but my trust in humanity, I had to get that back as well, and how my family basically was destroyed after I lost, like 80% of my family passed away after that as well. So it wasn't just the loss of my grandmother. I lost my family as well, which was extremely devastating. And when we had finished, I don't know what made me do it, but I just had this, I felt this huge presence in the room. So, for me it was a belief that there was a higher power. My connection to the divine was very present for me. And I could feel it moving in my body. And I asked him as he was leaving if I could give him a hug. And he was hesitant at first. And when I engulfed him in my arms, I said to him he needed to forgive himself because I had forgiven him. And he struggled with that. And then he started crying. And as I was holding him, even when I speak today, I can feel my heart just exploded. Like it just went, like there was so much white light. There was just so much energy in this room. I felt that, I spoke about grace. People ask, what is grace? And it was just that moment of unconditional love and compassion I had for this man that it took away everything from me many, many years ago. And I felt then I was at peace. I was so much at peace. There was no anger. I didn't feel the pain. I didn't feel the hurt. And right now, even as I speak, there's just so much peace that I knew I'd reached that place of true forgiveness is when you have compassion for your offender. People get that confused. When you don't have an emotional response, you're no longer triggered. You're no longer held prisoner to your own emotions, to the emotions of betrayal, of guilt, of shame, of anger, of hurt, and sadness. You've reached true forgiveness, and that's where I got to. And it was an amazing feeling. And the joy I felt afterwards, I sat in my car for about an hour just smiling and just embracing and taking in that moment, knowing that my 3 years of valuing myself enough to do this work had gotten me to this place. And that's why I want to teach people this as well in my work.
I'm just sitting here like I was envisioning as you're speaking that moment, when you're sitting so close to someone that had caused so much pain in your heart, right? Never mind what he did to your grandmother, but the strength it took. And I was sitting there just trying to tap into how I would feel, and I could feel something shifting in you, right? It was like that moment that you were looking in his eyes. It was almost like you had transcended all the pain. I don't know if that's the right word, but in that moment you were above all the pain and heartache that you and anger that you had been living with. It just had to be an amazing experience.
It was. I mean, you've used the right word, the transcending of the pain. And we are capable of doing that. It's just transcending, working through that and moving past that. And that's exactly what it felt like in that moment for me personally, yes.
Now, after you sat in the car for an hour, how did your heart, how did your vibrational energy change, and how did that change of your internal being ripple out to the rest of your life?
Well, that's a good question because, it's interesting because people say, well, you're forgiven, so, like you're awesome. It's like, well, nothing impacts you anymore, right? And that's not true. I'm still human. And so now what it does for me is that when I do get hurt, is that I have all these tools and these mechanisms, and I understand, I don't hold on so much for the grudges that we have, right? That pain we have. Sure, I embrace my pain. I think that's the biggest thing is I embrace that hurt. I don't avoid it. I take it in. I embrace it for what it is. I work through it, and then I let it go. I forgive. I work. The whole thing about self-forgiveness. This is the big piece. I think when we're forgiving other people, we tend to forget ourselves along the line as well. So part of the work is, they go hand in hand, forgiving yourself at the same time. Is because there's a bit of shame around the way we feel, because the society says, well, we need to be nice people. You can't hold grudges. You're a horrible person if you hold grudges. Whatever the judgments are, or whatever your inner critic is saying to you, there's that shame piece. And self-forgiveness release is, as part of releasing that shame is forgiving ourselves for things we didn't know beforehand, right?
True. It's so true. And one of the other things I noticed in my own journey to forgiveness of childhood trauma was I had a lightness of being. And I've realized since then, Di, that it takes so much more life force energy to hold on to anger, bitterness, revenge thoughts, which I had, and all of that once I let go, as you said, letting go is the big part, I felt a freedom, a lightness of being that then allowed me to create a life based on the energy of the lightness of being than the denseness of everything I had been carrying. And
I agree with you 100%. Yeah, definitely is that heaviness. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a real dense energy. And of course, when you're in it, you don't say, "Oh, I'm living in dense energy." It's after you find forgiveness, after you let go. And similar to your story, in my case, I was able to not only find forgiveness and let go, but with my abuser, but create a completely new relationship based on who I was then. Right? One based on if you truly, just like you were able to hug him, right? That was a heart-to-heart moment. I was able to do that in my life, and that was God, it's got to be, my daughter's 33, 26, 27 years ago. It changed everything for me. If I hadn't forgiven, I no longer do, but for a while I did say, man, I wonder where I would be if I hadn't, because the energy was so heavy. So we'll be back in a moment with Di Riseborough. We're going to dive even deeper into this powerful topic. And you can learn more about Di and the powerful work that she's doing in the world at DiRiseborough.com.
Free your mind. Expand your soul. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Are you tired of sitting on the sidelines of your life? Do you feel disconnected from your truth and inner joy? Are you ready to start marching to the sound of your own drum instead of living on autopilot? It's time to start consciously creating your life from a place of personal power and to accept the support you need to create and live your authentic life. Coach and international best-selling author Felicia Bauckham specializes in empowering women to march to their own drum and create their own unique path to happiness. Felicia has a gift for balancing grassroots pragmatism with the spiritual side of life. She inspires women to connect with their inner rebel so they can uncover the next chapter of their lives. Visit marchtooyourown.com today to schedule your complimentary Heart's Desire Breakthrough session.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hi everyone, this is Shay Parker, the host of Best of the Best, which airs live right here on IOM Radio every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific. I'm super excited to bring you expert guest hosts, spiritual discussions, free psychic readings, and so much more. I can promise that you will not want to miss this one-of-a-kind, fun, yet touching, down-to-earth show. Join us every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Pacific on OTR-FM. This is Shay Parker, and I can't wait to see you there.
The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is. A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
You're listening to Inspired Conversations. I'm your host, Linda Joy, and today is all about the power of forgiveness. With me today is Di Riseborough of DiRiseborough.com and author of the #1 bestseller, Forgiveness, How to Let Go When It Still Hurts. So, Di, why are feelings so important in the forgiveness process? And what happens if we avoid our feelings, which I'll put my hand up. I did that for many years.
Well, that's a really important question, Linda, in terms of part of our healing process. Often when I say to people, when I'm talking or I'm speaking or I'm even dealing with a client, I always say, I've forgiven. Often people go, no, I've forgiven, and they hear me speak, and they come up to me afterwards and say, great speech, and I've forgiven the person, I've forgiven this, and I go, oh, that's great. One of the examples I use in my book as well, and I use this, there's a difference between pseudo-forgiveness and true forgiveness. And what I mean by pseudo-forgiveness, often, I'm not sure about you, but I've watched the energy of forgiveness, and I watch a lot of it. It sometimes becomes lip service. It's like a meme, right? Forgive and forget. Emotions are hidden out in our body. Wondering what happens for true forgiveness to happen has to be an emotional and a physical release. Our mind forgives way before our bodies do. And if we're not in tune with our bodies and our emotions, we won't know what's happening. So often I say to somebody that has said to me, oh, no, I've forgiven that person. I go, okay. So let's hypothetically say you're walking down the grocery store with your cart, and around the corner comes the person you've forgiven. So I take them to sort of meditative state, and so I've got them in that place. I say, and I watch their body. I say, well, how do you respond? Do you see if you can kind of pretend they don't see you, you don't look at them, you don't catch eye contact? Do you sort of turn around and try and sneak down another aisle? Do you stop breathing? And often all those things happen. And then I go, well, if you're responding that particular way, that means you haven't dealt with the emotions that are stuck in your body. When we reach true forgiveness, we are no longer triggered emotionally from that place. That person that we are struggling to forgive has our power. When we reclaim our power, we're no longer going to be emotionally responding from that place of sort of victim energy. When I talk about victim energy, people go, oh, I'm not a victim, and I can relate to that because oh, no, I'm going to do my work. I will never be a victim of the circumstance, but also realizing I was a victim because he had my power. I gave it to him. Being a victim also means that we're responsible for something as well. So, I gave him my power as well by not, dealing with my work, by not stepping up, by not tuning into my body, not getting help. That's when I moved out of victimhood. And emotions are extremely important. So when you talk about the lightness, Linda, David Hawkins' work. I don't know if you know David Hawkins' work, Power versus Force.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about vibration, so each emotion has a vibration. So love sits at 500. And that's when we manifest the abundance and the joy into our lives, right? But when we are vibrating any lower than 500, we're suffering because there's shame is the lowest one. So when we have a lot of shame, and that can also, our depression that we have is unrepressed anger, right? I mean, suppressed anger that we're not dealing with. We're vibrating at a very, very low level. It can be hard to bring in abundance into our lives, joy and peace when we're circling in that sort of energy, that density of that energy talking about. But most people don't recognize it because they're not in tune with their body. And that is a key component of forgiveness is, dealing with your anger. I was afraid to deal with my anger. But once I started working through my anger in healthy ways and working through it, because a lot of women are taught not to be angry, right? We have to be nice, put a smile on. So a lot of people are afraid of anger based on maybe growing up in an environment where their parents were angry a lot. People don't like confrontation because there's anger involved, right? Well, the perception of anger involved. So, once we actually get to a place of dealing with our emotions and forgiveness, things start to shift within our body. If we don't, we become sick because your emotions become, if you're not dealing with the emotions, become a physical ailment, like the liver will harbor anger.
And, I'm listening going, wow. I've never heard it. Now, I never heard it explained this way about the triggers being stored in your physical body.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? And I was trying, as you were speaking, I'm thinking back going, there were times that I was so disconnected from my body after that. So my forgiveness came from my heart first, then I think my head, and I think my body followed a few years later.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It can, certainly. But I think what actually happens with a lot of people is one of our defense mechanisms is our head. And I find that a lot of my work, people are very disconnected from their body. So you might be very lucky in going through your heart first, but a lot of people are stuck in their head because it's scary to get into their body. Because once they start allowing those feelings to come up, they don't know what to do with them.
See, for me, that's where my disconnect was most of my life. In fact, I've shared it. I've always felt, not as much now, so correction, I used to feel really disconnected from my body. But, of course, I can see where that relates to childhood trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for me, that was the last part, I think, to heal all the remnants of the story. And I love something else you said a moment ago, that we have to own our part in the victim story, right? And I talk about that so much, Di, because it wasn't until I gave up my connection to that story, to that wound, that the healing could begin. Do you find then in the lot of the work you do as a spiritual psychotherapist and life coach that some people hold on so tight to that story, it's almost like it's become their identity?
Oh, very much so, Linda. And that's the thing as well, for me as well. I have a powerful story, but that's a story.
It's not the truth of who you are.
It's not who I am. No, it's not who I am. And, I forget often the impact my story does have because I'm not attached to my story. I don't wake up every morning going, oh, I've got the story, and this is who I am. I forget about it. Now and then when, there's certain, the anniversary of my grandmother's murder came up last week, and I forgot it was the 15th of May. And I was feeling all these emotions, and I was like, why am I feeling all these emotions? And I realized, when Facebook has this lovely reminder. It's like, oh, here's your memory.
Oh, yeah. Some days we don't want those, and other days they're beautiful memories.
Exactly, because actually that was the day I actually launched the book in memory of her anyway, to honor her memory. So on the 15th of May, 3 years ago, I launched the book, How to Forgive When It Still Hurts, Forgiveness. And so Facebook reminded me, today you launched your book. And I was like, oh, this is why I'm feeling all these emotions. This is why I felt so much grief as well. It doesn't mean, just because I've forgiven the man that murdered my man, the story has evolved. I don't necessarily feel these emotions because it was just, the memory of my family. It wasn't just my murder of my grandmother, but also, how my life has progressed. It's like grieving the losses of things that could never be going forward. I was like, okay, so I'm going to honor this grief in this moment. So now I understand that, right? But I wasn't thinking, oh, today's May the 15th. Okay, so here's my story. When we are so attached to our story, we never grow. We miss out on so much that is available to us when we are stuck with the blinkered, identity, because that's not who we are. Like I said to you, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. So part of that experience is to live fully as a human being, and also bring in that higher perspective. What is the thing I'm learning in my life today? Why am I on this planet? When I talk about, people always ask, what's my purpose in life? What's my life purpose? So your life purpose is to live a life full of purpose. Whether it's being a good person, whether it's, being a coach, whether it's going out into the world and making a difference in whatever way that is for you. It's living life with purpose. But when we're so stuck with our story, guess what? We're missing out on the possibilities or infinite possibilities of being so much more because we're not our story. It's what happened to us.
So true. We are so much more, and I think when we can grasp that, which it took me a long time. I stayed in the victim story. God, I'm 55, probably into my early 30s, and that's what I was talking about earlier. That difference between the dense energy of being in the story, because there's a lot of crap that comes with the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the lightness of being that I felt since then. It's like night and day difference. Night and day for me.
That's true. I mean, it's the feelings. I mean, for me, the reason I'm so passionate about my work is purely for selfish reasons. It's because I want people to have the experience that I've been able to have, the feeling of so much more, of the connectedness we are to everything, the healing that you experience when you go through your own process, the joy that you feel. Because, we tend to, when you're suffering, you're missing out on so much in our relationships with people around us, and even forming new relationships. We miss out with so much when we're so stuck in our suffering. So when you're doing your healing process, it opens up your eyes to so much more, your heart to so much more love in the world. There's either love or fear. So we can choose, do you want to stay in fear or do you want to experience more love in your life? And when you do this work, the rewards are priceless. And so for me, I want everybody to feel or have that experience, or at least have a taste of something, of how their lives can be so much more than what they are right now.
And what's beautiful is not only do you have the strategies, the resources, as a spiritual psychotherapist, life coach, you have the life experience. You are sharing with them something you've lived through, right? And I think that makes you an even more powerful teacher and therapist, because when you share your story going, hey, I'm not just teaching you this, I've lived it. I know what the experience feels like to come out on the other end. And Di, when we come back for the last segment, I'd love to know if there's one thing you'd really like people to understand about forgiveness. And I will be back in a moment with Di Riseborough of DiRiseborough.com.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Experience a homecoming to your heart. In the foreword of Dr. Deborah Riebel's new book, Being Love, How Loving Yourself Creates Ripples of Transformation in Your Relationships and the World, Marcy Shimoff shares, the answer to our inner longing isn't finding love, it's being love. The practices that Dr. Deborah presents in Being Love are keys to opening your heart and receiving your divine birthright as a physical manifestation of love. Her techniques, developed over years of successful private practice with her clients and from her extensive training in multiple disciplines, are accessible, compassionate, and effective. Her message is powerful, and if you allow it, will change your whole life. Order your copy of Being Love today at beinglovebook.com. and receive over 45 transformational gifts. Being Love is brought to you by Inspired Living Publishing.
Are you trying to get from point A to point B and need a little advice? Connect with the counselors at OMTimes Advisors. Whether you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual intuitive, the advisors participating at advisors.omtimes.com were carefully...
Me, a cat, moving in with a new human. It took a little getting used to. She has these weird games she likes to play, like this giant feather. She sticks it in my face. I swat it away. She sticks it in my face. I swat it away. It's almost like she thinks I enjoy it. But seeing how much fun she gets out of it, well, I guess it makes it all worth it. Humans.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
You're listening to Inspired Conversations. I'm your host, Linda Joy, and with me today is Intuitive Life Strategist Di Riseborough of DiRiseborough.com. Di, right before the break, I asked if there was one thing that you would want people to understand about forgiveness. What would it be?
The one thing I think that comes to mind for me, Linda, is forgiveness actually is a skill. And I don't think people realize that. They think it's just sort of this, I don't know, this sort of fluffy stuff that happens, right? It's a sort of a thing that just, you just forgive. But actually it's a skill. You learn techniques and tools of how to forgive. And we are all capable of learning it. I think the thing that I found as I did my own journey, one of the reasons I wrote the book is I got really frustrated when people used to say to me, "Oh, just let it go."
Oh yeah, I know that one.
Oh, just let it go. Just let it go. These are I just felt these empty words thrown at me, and I used to get so angry and frustrated, and it's like, how do I let it go? Maybe because I'm a pragmatic person, but I think, there's lots of books on forgiveness. There's lots of books, 200 pages on the philosophy of forgiveness. And I find that the reason I wrote the book, and it's a very short book, it's only about 65 pages, I think. And I didn't want to write a book that was so long. Because forgiveness brings up so much pain, people will dissociate, distract, right? And they won't, they don't. How many times you read a chapter over and over again? It's because we don't realize we're kind of sort of like going into a trance-like state and not gathering in that information. So I really wanted the book to be very practical. So forgiveness is really a skill that we all learn, the how to forgive. What do I need to do? Just saying affirmation is not enough, right? And so I feel that everybody is capable of forgiveness. And the second thing is that when we're forgiving, we are taking back our power. And it's about, it's not about the other person. People get so caught up on about the other person. You're doing this for yourself. So you can break the chains that bind you. Because, I used to say that he was in jail. He was a prisoner in jail. But I was a prisoner in the emotional aspect. So I was locked up. He might be incarcerated physically, but I was locked up emotionally. Well, and I wanted to be free of that.
It's so true. It's like we do put ourselves in a prison until we forgive, spiritually and emotionally. Mm-hmm. And as you and I know, when you don't take care of the spiritual and emotional, it will also start manifesting in the physical, right?
That's true.
With illness.
Become sick. Mm-hmm.
Now, for those who are listening right now, Di, who are saying, but you don't know, how can you ask me to forgive? What suggestions do you have for them, for those who are trying to forgive someone?
Well, the one thing I came to realize for myself at the time is to seek out some help. Because when you go through this process, it is, there's a part of being supported. And, sometimes our families can be very supportive, but sometimes people don't have people in their lives that are supportive in that respect, right? They keep saying, oh, just let it go, right? Just let it go. So seek out some help. Seek out, if you need to, some professional help. Because having that support is part of, knowing that you're supported allows you that space to actually just do your work rather than worrying about the judgments of others, right? You should be over this by now, People say to me, well, how long will it take you to forgive? I said, it took me 3 years of full work. But if I look at from the time that my grandmother was murdered to the time I actually got to true forgiveness, or actually got to that place of finding peace, it was 12 years.
Yeah, and there's no time frame that you can put on something so deep.
No. There's no time frame with forgiveness. There's no time frame with grief. Life isn't linear. We get confused with this whole aspect. So it's never too late to forgive, because this is peace for you, not for the other person. Is if you're in your 40s, your 50s, your 60s. I have clients that are in their 60s, and I say to them, well, you still got another 30 years to go. How do you want to live the next 30 years of your life? Do you want to still be dragging this baggage with you? Do you want to still be dragging this pain with you? Or do you want to be living a life where you feel empowered, where you feel that you have a sense of control. Because when we don't forgive, we feel helpless and powerless. We don't feel like we have control.
Exactly. And I want to say something that you also mentioned earlier ago. You said seek out help, and that's what I did also, professional help. Mm-hmm. And then you said for those that don't have family and friends. For me, I had to, and I don't know if this was true for you, I had to step outside the family and friends, even though their heart was in the right place. They had their own stories about the situation, right, that occurred. Just like, did you find that too, that they were being triggered also because they were part of the story?
That is true. I mean, this is the biggest thing. People say, well, why should I hire you? Well, why should I go out and, not necessarily me, but why should I get professional help or whatever that would be? Mainly because we are not part of your life. We don't have an agenda. When I talk about the people go, what do you mean they have an agenda? I said, everybody in your life is a character in your life. They all have an agenda of how you should be, we all have judgments, right? Or perceptions of how things are. And as you say, everybody has their heart in the right place, but it's from their perspective. And when you're dealing with somebody who's not part of your family, not part of your inner circle, their agenda is your agenda. So they support you, not what they think you should be doing, right? Because when I use the word should, it's a criticism. It's a judgment. It's like, let me support you in the way. How do you need to get to that place? What will work for you? What would work for one member of your family doesn't necessarily mean it's right for you, because, we're too connected to that story. It's that cloudiness. There's no clarity because everybody is impacted emotionally. So there's an emotional investment from the people around you in terms of how you should be showing up, or how you should be doing your healing, or what is the purpose of, where you should be getting to. I remember when I was doing my work, when I had to go back to the jail, when I went back, I think my mom kept on asking me, how did it go? And I just said, I can't talk to you right now about this, because this is about my journey. Because
it was that deep and personal to you.
It was. It wasn't, my mom, she found my grandmother. So she was really, until the day she died, she never did any of her own work in terms of this. And that brings a lot of pain to me to watch my mom suffer so much. But, I just couldn't have this conversation with her because she wouldn't understand why I did this. Why I went and it wasn't about her, she kept, or anybody else in my family. This was for me. So, this is why finding somebody else that's not connected to us is such a gift to ourselves. Or to me, it was such a gift being in, having that opportunity to focus purely on myself and having a supportive hand in whatever direction I was deciding to go.
And I think that's so important, and those are powerful tips that you've left our listeners with. And I want to invite any listener that's really struggling with forgiveness to give yourself this gift, to seek out the help and support that you need. If what you've been doing up to this point isn't working, it's time to step out and get the help that's out there for you. And in my personal opinion is start right here. Start with Di and the work that she's doing. As I shared earlier, she combines spiritual psychotherapy, life coaching, and energy psychology to help clients move through forgiveness and other areas of their life. So please visit DiRiseborough.com. And Di, I want to thank you for being here and for being willing to share your journey to forgiveness. The work you're doing in the world is so powerful. It's what attracted me to you about 18 months ago, and I'm so blessed to have you on the show sharing your wisdom.
Well, thank you so much, Linda, for giving me the opportunity to share my story with the world.
Well, it's powerful. And again, everyone, that's DiRiseborough.com. I will see you on the next show. Blessings, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. Join our sacred space every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern and meet leading female visionaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. Inspired Conversations with Linda Joy is a soulful venue where guests share the obstacles they've overcome, along with wisdom and lessons learned on their personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic and soulful living.